Have you ever stopped to think that, amid all the chaos, pain, and confusion the world faces, there is a silent but powerful promise that has already begun to be fulfilled? A promise that spans centuries, that has withstood persecution, and that, according to many signs and revelations, is more alive and closer to fulfillment than ever. The victory of the Immaculate Conception over the forces of evil. What if I told you that this victory is not just a distant event in the pages of ancient prophecies, but something that is happening before our eyes, right now? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now could completely change the way you view the present moment in our history. The truth is that behind every war, every injustice, every attack on faith and human dignity, there is an invisible battle, a real, intense, and relentless spiritual war. It's not just ideas or ideologies that are at stake, but the fate of souls. And it is precisely in this scenario of darkness and uncertainty that the luminous figure of the Immaculate Conception emerges. Not as a mere reminder of devotion, but as a living standard, leading an army of hearts willing to resist. Have you ever experienced moments when you felt like the darkness wanted to suffocate your faith? The world may not realize it, but clear signs have been given. From ancient Marian apparitions to more recent messages, such as those from Medjugorje, a consistent narrative points to a final triumph, the moment when love will definitively conquer hatred, and light will dispel all shadows. This is not just a pretty promise to console the faithful. It is a divine plan unfolding before us, even if much of it remains hidden from our eyes. And within this plan, you play a much more important role than you imagine. The Immaculate Conception, a symbol of absolute purity and victory over sin, was not exalted merely as a dogma of the Catholic faith. She is the reflection of humanity as God dreamed it, free from the stain of evil, intact in the face of the corruption that seeks to destroy all that is sacred. And this same purity that shines within her is the most powerful weapon against the enemy. That is why, in every apparition, in every message, Mary calls us to conversion, to prayer, to fasting, not as empty gestures, but as spiritual shields, capable of protecting and transforming hearts. You may be wondering, but where is this victory? How will it happen? The answers are not all revealed, and it is precisely this mystery that keeps millions of people attentive to Mary's words, especially regarding the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, messages that, according to reports, bring warnings, guidance, and revelations that will be part of this promised triumph. What is hidden within them? And how does this connect to the times we live in? The fact is that the triumph of the Immaculate Conception will not only be a grand event visible to all, but a process, a movement of transformation that has already begun in the hearts of those who choose to walk in the light. And perhaps, without realizing it, you are already participating in it. That's why understanding this plan, recognizing the signs, and taking action now is so urgent. Now, I want you to pay attention to something. What we're going to explore next goes far beyond theory or tradition. We're going to go behind the scenes of this promise, look at the signs that have already been fulfilled and those yet to come, and discover your role in this story that's being written right now. And while you absorb all this, I want to open a space for something I consider essential. Our conversation here is not one voice, but many. Every experience, every reflection, every feeling you carry about this topic is immensely valuable, because it is precisely these sharings that make this space alive. If this topic resonates with you, leave here in the comments what has touched you most so far. It could be a memory, a question, or even a sign you believe you've received. It's incredible how, when one person shares, the other recognizes and also becomes stronger. And look, your participation here goes far beyond a click. When you like, YouTube understands that this content is relevant and shows it to more people, and this, ultimately, is another step towards ensuring this message reaches those who truly need to hear it. The same goes for subscribing to the channel. By subscribing, you not only ensure that you'll continue to follow the next revelations and reflections, but you also help build a community united by faith and the pursuit of truth. Think of it this way: every comment, every like, every new subscription is like a small, lit flame, and when these flames unite, they illuminate much more than we can imagine. So, feel it in your heart, participate now. Because it is with this union that we go deeper into this journey, and there is still much to be revealed about the promised triumph of the Immaculate Conception. When we speak of the Immaculate Conception, many think only of the dogma proclaimed by the Church, as if it were an honorary title granted to Mary for her importance in the history of salvation. But the truth is that the spiritual significance of this mystery goes far beyond a theological definition. It is not just a concept to be studied. It is a living sign, a constant reminder that purity and victory over sin are not only possible, but part of God's original plan for each of us. Mary, from the first moment of her existence, was preserved from all stain, not by her own merit, but by anticipated grace, because she would be the perfect space where the Son of God himself would dwell. This divine choice was not random. It was strategic, part of a much larger plan, designed before the creation of the world. Consider for a moment the power of this act. While all humanity was marked by the wound of original sin, a young woman from Nazareth was chosen to be the perfect reflection of what God dreamed for humanity. It is as if, in the midst of a devastated field, an untouched flower emerged, alive and full of fragrance, showing that beauty and life are still possible. And this, for us, is not just a distant inspiration. It is a call to transformation. If God could preserve Mary from sin, He can also restore in us the purity and strength we need to overcome temptation and resist evil. What we often fail to realize is that the Immaculate Conception is not just about Mary, but about what God wants to do in every willing heart. It's about mindset, the way we view ourselves and the world around us. It's about daily decisions, the ones we make in silence, when no one is looking, but which shape the course of our lives. Mary is the perfect example that it is possible to live with integrity, even amid pressure and opposition. And this brings us to a point that profoundly touches our spiritual journey. Victory over sin does not begin with grand public gestures, but behind the scenes of the soul. It is there, in silent prayer, in renouncing small temptations, in choosing to forgive when it would be easier to hold a grudge, that we build a life that reflects God's light. The purity of the Immaculate Conception shows us that holiness is not a heavy burden, but true freedom. It is as if, each time we reject evil and choose good, we are actively participating in this same victory that Mary experienced from the beginning. There is also a very strong aspect of revelation here. Mary is not only the mother of Jesus, she is also the first disciple, the first to fully believe in God's promises, even without understanding every detail. This total trust is part of what makes her immaculate, not just the absence of sin, but the absolute presence of faith. A faith that does not negotiate with doubt, that does not need to see, to believe, that accepts the path even when it seems impossible. And it is this faith that makes her an unbeatable force against darkness. When we look at the world today, it's easy to feel like we're losing this battle. But the Immaculate Conception is a reminder that victory is already assured, not by our own strength, but because God has already decided the end of this story. And, at the same time, it's an invitation to be an active part of this victory, not as spectators, but as combatants. Every action we take, whether at work, in our family, in our conversations, or even in our thoughts, can be an act of resistance against evil. The most striking thing is to realize how this purity isn't about isolation, but about impact. Mary wasn't preserved to live apart from the world, but to enter it and transform it with her presence. And it is here that we understand the true meaning of this mystery. True purity doesn't hide, it illuminates. It doesn't flee from darkness, but enters it to show that the light is stronger. And if this is her mission, it can be ours too. No matter what our past, what failures or mistakes we've made, the same God who preserved Mary is capable of renewing and restoring any heart that opens itself to His grace. That's why, when we meditate on the Immaculate Conception, we're not just admiring a privilege given to a special woman, but contemplating a portrait of what God can and wants to do in each of us. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding the Immaculate Conception is not just about knowing the story, but realizing how it connects to the invisible battle we are living today. A battle that requires not only faith, but courage and discernment to recognize where the traps are and how to overcome them with the right weapons. Comment there. I'm on this journey too. If the Immaculate Conception shows us what it means to live fully in the light, understanding the invisible battle between light and darkness makes us realize why this purity is so necessary. Because, while we go about our routines, make plans, and worry about everyday matters, there is a war going on at a level our eyes cannot see. It is not a conflict with defined borders or uniformed armies, but a constant combat that infiltrates thoughts, emotions, decisions, and even the structures that govern the world. It is a struggle that is not measured in kilometers conquered, but in souls preserved or lost. This battle is silent, yet devastating. It manifests itself when discouragement makes us give up on something good, when lies present themselves as truth, when hatred tries to disguise itself as justice. And precisely because it is invisible, it is even more dangerous. It is as if there were a hidden web, subtly woven, trying to distance us from what is essential. In this scenario, Mary is not only a reminder of faith, but a seasoned commander who knows every trap the enemy sets. She has faced, in a unique way, the pressure of darkness and emerged victorious, not with human weapons, but with unshakable faith. Throughout history, we see that whenever evil intensifies, her presence becomes more evident. In recognized apparitions or in accounts spanning generations, there is a pattern. Mary appears not to fuel curiosity, but to warn, correct, and strengthen. She is not just a symbol of devotion, but a sign of spiritual strategy. It is as if she were saying, I know how this battle works, and I know how to win it. Follow me. And following Mary is not following a distant or untouchable figure, but a mother who fights alongside us, who intercedes, who stands between us and the real danger we often don't even perceive. Her role in this struggle is active and decisive. She doesn't wait for the forces of evil to vanquish themselves. She acts, and her action isn't limited to the extraordinary. She acts in the ordinary, in small acts of faith that together build a wall against the darkness. When a child prays with a sincere heart, when someone forgives an enemy, when a person resists the temptation to act selfishly, Mary is there, reinforcing that choice, because each of these gestures weakens the darkness. It is in this invisible field that the greatest victories are achieved. This war is not balanced. The forces of evil are aggressive, persistent, and know how to exploit our weaknesses. But Mary represents the opposite of this, the light that never fades, the certainty that grace is stronger than any attack. She doesn't enter this fight to improvise. She follows a plan that comes from God Himself, and every step she takes is part of a perfect strategy. And if we often feel small in the face of the scale of the battle, that's precisely where her strength comes in, reminding us that we are not alone, that there is firm and secure leadership at the forefront. The most fascinating thing is that this spiritual warfare isn't just a religious concept, but something we can perceive behind the scenes of life. How many times have we felt like something was trying to push us down, while another force seemed to pull us back to the surface? How many important decisions were made on the edge, between giving in and resisting? It is in this delicate terrain that Mary acts most intensely, helping to tip the balance toward the light. And the more aware we are of this reality, the better prepared we will be to avoid being manipulated by the shadows. Recognizing this battle changes the way we see everything. Small situations take on new meaning because we understand that neutrality does not exist. We either walk toward the light or we turn away from it. And Mary, as a spiritual leader, constantly calls us to choose, to act, to not stand still. It is a personal summons, requiring courage, but accompanied by the promise that, by following her, we will be under a command that already knows the end of this war, and that end is victory. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding the scale of this battle also means understanding how Mary's signs and interventions fit into a much larger plan, revealing clues of what is yet to come and how each of us can position ourselves so as not to be surprised. Right there. This makes sense to me. When we talk about the prophetic scenario of Medjugorje, we're not just referring to a specific location in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where, according to reports, 6 young women began experiencing apparitions of Mary in 1981. We're talking about a point in recent history when heaven and earth seem to have touched in a concrete way, awakening millions of people to a spiritual urgency. It's impossible to ignore the impact this phenomenon has had and continues to have. More than 4 decades have passed, and even today, thousands of pilgrims from all over the world travel there in search of answers, conversion, and inner renewal. Something like this isn't just based on curiosity. There's a profound, silent, yet persistent effect that moves hearts. What's striking about Medjugorje is its constancy. Unlike other moments in history, when apparitions lasted a set period and then ceased, here the messages, according to the visionaries, continue. And they're not simple words of comfort, but guidance, warnings, and invitations to change our lives. It's as if each phrase is directed not only to those physically present, but to all of us, wherever we are. There's a clear intention to prepare, to awaken, to align the hearts of the faithful for something greater that is yet to come. This character of preparation is one of the most striking aspects of Medjugorje. The messages don't just offer comfort, they call for action. They speak of constant prayer, fasting, reading the Word, reconciliation, and the Eucharist. And while this may seem basic to the Christian life, the tone is urgent. It's not just a live this way because it's good, but a live this way because it will be necessary. This detail changes everything, because it reveals a larger context, a decisive time approaching that will require firm faith, discernment, and perseverance. The most interesting thing is that Medjugorje doesn't place itself at the center of the story. It points to something beyond. Mary herself, in her messages, doesn't draw attention to herself, but to Christ, to the need for conversion, and to the spiritual battle each person faces. It's as if she were setting up a spiritual training camp where every prayer, every sacrifice, and every act of love was part of a strengthening process for more difficult days. And here comes the prophetic dimension that so many feel when speaking of Medjugorje. The messages reveal that there are secrets, 10, to be exact, of which 7 have not yet been revealed to the public. These secrets, according to the visionaries, are linked to future events, some that will serve as undeniable signs for the world, others that will bring trials and challenges, but it is not fear that guides these revelations, but mercy. Mary warns us so that we can prepare, not panic. The spiritual impact of Medjugorje is not limited to individual lives. There are testimonies of entire communities transformed, religious vocations awakened, families restored. It's as if a silent wave has spread, reaching people who may never set foot in that village, but who have nonetheless been touched by the message. This shows us that the phenomenon goes far beyond the physical. It is rooted in the spiritual, the invisible, in that same battlefield we spoke of earlier. And even if some people view Medjugorje with skepticism, the fact is that the fruit is undeniable. The number of confessions, people returning to faith, and lives transformed cannot be simply ignored. There's something happening there that stands the test of time, that crosses borders, and that remains alive despite criticism, political changes, and even armed conflicts in the region. Medjugorje also invites us to reflect on how we perceive God's signs in our time. Are we attentive or distracted? Do we recognize when He calls us to conversion, or do we wait for something spectacular to believe? This is one of the most powerful hidden truths of this phenomenon. It is not the extraordinary itself that matters, but how it transforms us. And transformation only happens if the message leaves the realm of words and enters the realm of actions. That's why, when we look at Medjugorje in the prophetic context, we cannot see it as an isolated event, but as part of a line that connects other manifestations of Mary throughout history, from Lourdes to Fatima, and now, apparently, there too, each with its own particularity, but all with the same focus: to prepare, to strengthen, to warn. What sets Medjugorje apart is the time we live in, an accelerated, fragmented time, where the faith of many is lost amid distractions and uncertainty. And if all of this is indeed connected to a final moment of great trial and also of great victory, then Medjugorje is more than a sign, it is a milestone on humanity's spiritual map, a point where heaven decided to intervene directly, not to change events for us, but to teach us to face them with the strength of faith. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding the importance of Medjugorje is also understanding the mystery of the unrevealed messages, and how what is still kept can decisively impact the spiritual journey of all humanity. Comment there. I'm on this journey too. Among all the elements that make Medjugorje so intriguing, there is one point that both arouses curiosity and provokes profound reflection: the 7 unrevealed messages. These are not fabricated stories or loose speculation, but something that visionaries themselves claim to have received, and which, to this day, remains hidden. And it is precisely in this silence that the power of this mystery lies. Because what is unsaid, what is still hidden, awakens in us a sense of vigilance and expectation that we might not have if we already knew all the details. The unrevealed messages were not kept by chance. There is a reason, a right time for them to come to light, and this in itself makes us reflect on the way God guides history. He doesn't always give us everything at once, but prepares us in stages, so that we are ready when the revelation comes. It's as if we were before a book whose final chapters are sealed, and even without reading them, we already know they have the power to change everything. This waiting is not passive, it is active. It requires that, while we wait, we strengthen ourselves, mature spiritually, and adjust our mindset to receive something that will possibly confront and transform us. We cannot forget that the messages, revealed thus far, already contain a dense content, filled with invitations to conversion, prayer, and preparation. If these, which are open, are already so direct and incisive, what about those still protected by the veil of secrecy? It's impossible not to wonder, are they warnings about difficult times? Instructions for moments of crisis? Prophecies about events that will change the trajectory of humanity? Or perhaps spiritual revelations so profound that they can only be fully understood once certain things have already happened? What we know is that these messages are part of a larger plan. They are not isolated pieces of information, not curiosities, meant to fuel theoretical debate. They connect with the entire story of love, justice, and mercy that Mary has been announcing throughout the centuries. It's as if they were missing pieces to complete a puzzle, and once fitted together, they will reveal the whole picture. Therefore, their silence is not empty, it is full of meaning, and perhaps the greatest challenge is precisely trusting in this time of waiting. There's also the psychological and spiritual impact of this expectation. Knowing that something so important is being held back, only to be revealed at the right time, creates a kind of inner tension. And this tension can move us in 2 ways. Either it leads to anxiety and an incessant search for answers, or it pushes us toward a true deepening of faith, making us live more consciously and vigilantly. It's as if Mary were saying, don't worry about what you don't yet know. Worry about faithfully living what has already been said. If we look at biblical history, we see that God has always worked this way. He gave Noah instructions long before the rain fell. He revealed parts of the plan to Moses before showing him the promised land. He prepared the prophets 4 times they would never see fulfilled. In every case, there was a hidden truth that would only be revealed at the exact moment. Moment was always strategic. Why would it be any different now? The 7 unrevealed messages carry with them this same divine logic. They are, in some way, connected to the unfolding of global and spiritual events. And perhaps the most important thing is not exactly knowing the content now, but being spiritually mature enough to deal with it when the time comes. Because listening is not enough. It will be necessary to act. And this is where the importance of cultivating a life steadfast in prayer right decisions, and resistance to evil comes in. The anticipation surrounding these messages is not an invitation to idle curiosity, but to conscious preparation. It's about adjusting our hearts to receive something that won't come to scare us, but to guide us. And when we think this way, we realize that true preparation begins today, not the day the revelation happens, because those who are rooted in faith and live in the light will not be caught off guard, even in the face of major changes. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding the importance of these unrevealed messages leads us directly to reflect on the role of each believer in the final triumph and how our choices today determine the strength with which we will face the decisive days to come. Comment there, that makes sense to me. When we speak of the triumph of the Immaculate Conception, it's easy to imagine a grand, almost cinematic event, where evil is suddenly and definitively defeated. But the hidden truth that many forget is that this victory will not be something we simply watch as spectators. It is a living, ongoing process, and every believer is called to actively participate. There is no neutrality in this spiritual battle. Either one is contributing to the advancement of light, or, through inaction, allowing darkness to gain ground. That this participation isn't limited to grand heroic acts or moments of public prominence. It begins in the silent decisions of everyday life, in the way we treat those around us, in the way we react to provocation, in the choice to speak the truth when it would be easier to remain silent, and even in the time we decide to dedicate to prayer rather than indulge in distractions. Each choice is like a seed planted. It either germinates into life or into emptiness. Prayer, conversion, and daily choices are not just automatically repeated religious concepts. They are concrete weapons. When someone prays sincerely, they are strengthening not only their own soul but also creating an invisible safety net that reaches places and people they may never know. When they decide to change a behavior, break a harmful habit, or let go of a resentment, they are freeing up space for God's grace to act more freely. When they choose good, even if no one recognizes it, they are weakening the chains that keep evil in action. And here comes a fundamental aspect of mindset. Many expect triumph to come from outside, when in fact, it also needs to begin within. External victory will be a reflection of internal victories accumulated over time. It's as if each heart that converts and remains faithful is a small territory conquered by the light. And the more territories we conquer, the closer we will be to seeing the full picture of triumph. This vision completely changes the way we view the spiritual life. It ceases to be a list of obligations and becomes a strategic journey, where each step is considered with purpose. Mary, in calling us to prayer and conversion, is not just asking for devotion. She is training spiritual soldiers, teaching them to resist and counterattack wherever evil tries to infiltrate. And this is a battle, one more with perseverance than with bursts of momentary enthusiasm. The role of each believer also involves a profound level of discernment. We live in times of confusion, where contradictory messages, ideologies, and even false signs can distract us. Having clarity, knowing how to distinguish God's voice from distractions, is an essential part of this preparation. And discernment isn't acquired overnight, it is cultivated through intimacy with God, listening to the Word, paying attention to signs, and often, through the humility of seeking counsel from those who have already walked a solid path of faith. Another point we cannot ignore is the collective impact of this individual fidelity. A single believer can be a light in the environment in which they live, but when this light joins with that of many others, a powerful current is formed, capable of influencing entire realities. This is why the victory of the Immaculate Conception, although prophesied and assured, relies on the active participation of God's people. We are called to be not only beneficiaries of this triumph, but also instruments of it. And here's an important detail. This participation isn't optional for those who want to get more involved. It's part of the commitment we make when we say yes to faith. Every time we ignore this call, we miss the opportunity to accelerate the advance of the light. But every time we respond with courage and determination, we are contributing to something that will have an eternal impact. The most inspiring thing is that Mary doesn't ask anything impossible of us. She asks us for constancy, fidelity, and love. She calls us to use the spiritual weapons we already have at our disposal and to live in such a way that our daily choices echo in the spiritual landscape. And by doing so, even without realizing it, we are already actively participating in the triumph she announced. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding the role of each believer naturally leads us to look at the signs and confirmations that God and Mary have given throughout history, showing that this victory has already begun and is closer than many imagine. Right there, I'm on this journey too. Throughout history, there are moments that, for those with eyes of faith, sound like silent yet powerful confirmations of Mary's promise to protect and guide the faithful. These are not isolated episodes, as if they were pleasant coincidences. They are events that, viewed as a whole, reveal a pattern, a constant presence that manifests itself when darkness tries to advance. And what is most striking is that these signs occur not only in places of great devotion, but also in the most unexpected corners, often behind the scenes of ordinary life, where few imagine something extraordinary could happen. One need only look at the history of apparitions recognized by the Church to perceive this line of care. In Guadalupe, in the 16th century, when the indigenous people and the Christian faith seemed irreconcilable, Mary appeared with mixed features, wearing symbols that spoke to the hearts of the local people. And, through a simple cloak, transformed a cultural clash into a bridge of dialogue and conversion. In Lourdes, in the 19th century, the young Bernadette saw a lady dressed in white who identified herself as the Immaculate Conception, confirming a dogma proclaimed only a few years earlier and leading millions to seek physical and spiritual healing. In Fatima, in the early 20th century, Mary warned of historical events that actually happened, such as World War II and the spread of ideologies that threatened the faith. These signs, when analyzed together, reveal a common thread. Whenever humanity approaches periods of confusion, crisis, or spiritual danger, Mary intervenes, whether clearly or subtly, but always with the same central message: prayer, conversion, and trust in God. It's as if she's telling us that, even when the situation seems hopeless, there's a greater plan at work, and in it, victory is already assured. But it's not just during major events that we perceive her presence. There are also personal, intimate accounts of people who, in moments of despair, felt an inexplicable peace, found a religious object fallen in an unlikely place, heard a phrase at just the right moment, or received an unexpected answer. Small experiences like these, added together, form an invisible mosaic of daily confirmations that she is attentive, guiding, and protecting. Some testimonies speak of seemingly chance deliverances that later turned out to be last-minute change of route that avoided an accident, an unexpected delay that prevented someone from being in the wrong place at the wrong time, an unlikely encounter with someone who said exactly what needed to be heard. Many see these situations as mere coincidence, but those who live in faith recognize that there is something greater, a care that never fails. And of course, there are also the more visible and collective signs: statues exuding the scent of roses, tears flowing from images without scientific explanation, cures without medical explanation after fervent prayers. These events, however much they spark controversy and debate, continue to occur in different parts of the world and cannot be ignored, simply because they are difficult to explain. It's interesting to note that these signs don't appear to replace faith, but to confirm it. They aren't spectacles meant to impress, but reminders meant to strengthen. They function as points of light in the midst of darkness, not so that we can stand still and admire them, but so that we can move forward with greater confidence on the path. And it is precisely this constancy throughout the centuries that makes us understand that Mary's promise is not symbolic. It is practical, real, and active. When she says, "I will be with you," she is not speaking poetically, but of a concrete presence, one that acts, that intervenes. And that continues today, even when we don't realize it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because looking at these signs leads us to understand that they come not only to comfort, but to prepare us, and it is in this preparation that the spiritual weapons revealed by Mary come into play. Concrete instruments so that each believer can face and overcome this battle. Comment there. That makes sense to me. If the signs and confirmations throughout history serve as beacons pointing the way, the call to spiritual preparation is an invitation for each of us to begin walking consciously and determinedly in that direction. It's not just about waiting for the promised victory to happen, but about standing firm and vigilant when it fully manifests. And this vigilance isn't just a matter of attention, but of inner strengthening. Mary doesn't call us to passive waiting. She invites us to equip ourselves with everything necessary to resist the forces of evil and welcome, with a ready heart, the triumph that has already been announced. Preparing yourself spiritually is more than simply following a set of religious practices like a mechanical routine. It's adopting a different mindset, where every act, every word, and every decision takes on spiritual weight. Prayer, for example, ceases to be merely a repetition of formulas and becomes a living, deep, and intimate dialogue with God, capable of calming the mind, strengthening the spirit, and opening space for light to penetrate where there was previously darkness. It is in this daily dialogue that we find the strength to carry on, even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. Fasting, often seen only as a physical sacrifice, is actually a training in self-control. It teaches us to place our spirit above our immediate desires, to say no to what separates us from God, even when it seems harmless. It is an act of freedom because it frees us from petty dependencies and makes us more attentive to what truly matters. When we combine fasting with prayer, we create an even more open channel for God's action. And this combination has been repeatedly highlighted by Mary as one of the most effective weapons against evil. The sacraments, especially confession and the Eucharist, are like reserves of strength for this battle. In confession, we find not only forgiveness, but also renewal of the soul. as if we were clearing the ground so that nothing can impede grace from fully acting. In the Eucharist, we receive Christ himself, the living force that sustains and transforms. These moments are not distant ceremonies. They are direct encounters with the source of spiritual life. Bible reading is another key Mary constantly offers us. The Word of God is more than a sacred book. It is a manual of discernment, a beacon that helps us identify the subtleties of darkness and recognize God's voice amid the noise of the world. The more we immerse ourselves in Scripture, the better prepared we are to make choices that keep us firmly in the light. And all of this only makes sense when translated into a life of holiness. And here, holiness doesn't mean untouchable perfection, but consistency. It's living in such a way that our actions reflect what we profess with our lips. It's loving when it would be easier to ignore. It's helping without expecting anything. In return, it's maintaining integrity when no one is looking. Holiness is essentially the most powerful witness we can give, and it's what most effectively weakens the forces of evil. This preparation isn't something we do just for ourselves. It's a legacy we leave for those who come after us. When a believer lives consistently and committedly, they become a support for others, an example that inspires and strengthens. This is how a silent but unbeatable army is formed, ready to welcome the victory of the Immaculate Conception not as spectators, but as active participants. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because talking about preparation naturally leads us to reflect on the spiritual weapons that Mary entrusted to you as specific and powerful tools to face the battles of today and those yet to come, and which need to be understood not as symbols but as concrete combat strategies. Comment. There. That makes sense to me. When Mary speaks of spiritual weapons, she isn't referring to symbolic elements that serve merely as inspiration, but to concrete, practical tools that have a real impact in the fight against the spiritual forces that seek to weaken faith. It's as if, with each message, she were laying out a strategic map, showing which instruments to use, how, and why. And these instruments aren't modern inventions or complex ideas. They are the same ones that have sustained saints, martyrs, and simple believers throughout the centuries. The first is the Rosary, and here it's important to understand that it's not just a sequence of memorized prayers. Each Hail Mary is like a shot of an arrow, a surefire strike against the shadows. The Rosary is contemplation and action at the same time. When we pray, we delve into the mysteries of the lives of Christ and Mary, allowing our minds and hearts to align with God's plan. At the same time, an invisible force acts, warding off negative spiritual influences and bringing peace to our surroundings. This is why Mary insists so much on this practice, because she knows the power this chain of prayers has to transform entire realities. Confession is another essential weapon, and perhaps one of the most underrated today. Many see it simply as an act of asking for forgiveness, but it is much more than that. It is liberation, restoration, and spiritual healing. Each time we approach the sacrament with sincerity, we not only leave behind the weight of sin, but also weaken its hold on us. It's like breaking chains that previously held us back. Mary knows that a free soul is a strong soul, and so she invites us to confess frequently, not to live trapped in guilt, but to live light, ready for battle. The Eucharist is the heart of all spiritual weapons. By receiving Christ himself, we are not merely participating in a rite, we are uniting ourselves with the source of life, the one who has already definitively conquered evil. Each communion received in a state of grace is like a reinforcement of strength that cannot be measured solely in human terms. It is the living presence of Jesus within us, radiating light, strengthening the soul, and making it more resistant to spiritual attacks. Mary always points to the Eucharist because she knows that without this intimate union with Christ, no other weapon will have the same effectiveness. Finally, the Word of God. The Scriptures are not just an ancient book, but a living voice that speaks directly to our time and our situations. Mary invites us to read and meditate on the Word, for in it we find direction, discernment, and encouragement. It is the double-edged sword mentioned in the letter to the Hebrews, capable of cutting through lies, exposing deception, and revealing hidden truth. When we have the Word in our hearts and minds, we are less vulnerable to the world's manipulation and more able to make decisions aligned with God's will. These weapons, when used together, form a nearly impenetrable shield. They are not isolated practices that work only in times of crisis, but a lifestyle. The Rosary maintains constant prayer, confession, cleanses and strengthens the soul. The Eucharist unites us with Christ himself, and the Word of God illuminates our path. Mary does not present these weapons to us as an option, but as a necessity to resist and overcome. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding these weapons prepares us to reflect on what the triumph of the Immaculate Conception truly means, not as a distant concept, but as a reality that has already begun to take shape and that will transform history irreversibly. Right there, I'm on this journey too. The triumph of the Immaculate Conception is not a vague promise projected into the distant future, something that will only happen when circumstances are ideal. It is already happening, silently, like a river flowing underground before bursting. To the surface, every heart that opens to grace, every life that decides to abandon darkness and walk in the light, is a piece of this triumph being realized here and now. Mary does not speak to us of something that will come suddenly, as if it were an isolated spectacle, but of a process that grows in the silence, constancy, and fidelity of millions of faithful spread throughout the world. What's at stake is not just the victory of one devotion over another, but the definitive victory of love over hate, of purity over corruption, of faith over unbelief. When we speak of triumph, we are speaking of transformation, of a profound change in the mindset and heart of humanity. It is the moment when good will no longer be merely an option, but the prevailing reality, when lies will no longer have power, and truth will reign fully. And even though this may seem impossible given the current scenario, Mary assures us that this is the final destination of the spiritual battle we are experiencing. This triumph is not just collective, it is deeply personal. Before it manifests itself in the world at large, it must happen within us. Every time we forgive instead of holding a grudge, every time we resist temptation, every time we choose to act with justice and compassion, we are experiencing a foretaste of this triumph. This is how it advances, almost imperceptibly to the human eye, but powerfully on the spiritual plane. Then when we look behind the scenes of history, we realize that this progress is real. It's not just the great visible victories that matter, but the small acts of loyalty hidden in everyday life. A mother who teaches her son to pray, a young man who chooses to follow principles even when everything pushes him to the contrary, a worker who refuses to give in to corruption. These seemingly simple decisions are the building blocks of triumph. But there is also a prophetic dimension to this promise. Mary doesn't just speak of a gradual improvement in the world, she speaks of a decisive moment, a turning point when the power of evil will be definitively crushed. It will be the moment when the Immaculate Heart of Mary, united with the Sacred Heart of Jesus, will triumph completely, and the kingdom of God will be clearly recognized as sovereign. We don't know all the details of how this will happen, and perhaps we won't even fully understand it until it happens. But the messages make it clear that it will be visible, transformative, and indisputable. This certainty invites us to live differently. If we know that final victory is already assured, we need not give in to despair in the face of crises or the advances of darkness. On the contrary, we are called to act with greater courage, more hope, and more commitment, knowing that every gesture counts. The triumph of the Immaculate Conception will not be a gift given to a complacent people, but the reward of a people who fought, persevered, and believed even when everything seemed to be against them. And this struggle is not just about resistance, but about construction. Triumph also means the restoration of harmony between God and humanity, the healing of the wounds caused by sin, and the renewal of creation. It is a project of redemption that goes far beyond what we can imagine. Mary shows us that to reach this point, we must begin with our own lives, but without forgetting that we are part of something much greater. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because understanding the triumph itself naturally leads us to reflect on how to end this journey with a real commitment, strengthening the connection between all who believe in this promise and keeping the flame alive until the day we see its full realization. Comment there. That makes sense to me. If everything we've discussed so far has touched your heart in some way, then perhaps it's time to transform this reflection into a real statement. Because the triumph of the Immaculate Conception isn't just a beautiful promise to admire from afar, but a call to decide which side we want to be on when things become even more intense. It's not a choice made hastily or without awareness, but a decision that involves surrender, courage, and, above all, trust. And that's why I now invite you to reflect deeply. In the face of this battle between light and darkness, where do you want to stand? This isn't just a theoretical question, it's something that manifests itself in the small, everyday decisions in the way we react to injustice, in the time we dedicate to prayer, in the patience we choose to have even when the world provokes us to anger. Being on the side of the light means making a constant commitment to aligning ourselves with truth and love, even when it requires sacrifice or goes against the logic of the world. It's a path that demands steadfastness, but it also brings a peace that nothing and no one can steal. So, I want to propose something symbolic, yet very powerful. If this message resonated with you and awakened something within you, write in the comments, "I'd choose to be on the side of the light." It's not just a sentence, it's a public declaration, a milestone in your decision. When you write this, you're not just recording words, but making a visible commitment that can inspire others to do the same. Sometimes, a simple gesture like this is the starting point for a much greater transformation. And if you'd like to continue this journey with me, following other messages, reflections, and revelations that deepen what we've discussed today, subscribe to the channel. This isn't just a way to receive new content, but to strengthen a community of people who believe in the victory of good and who support each other to persevere. Every subscription, every like, and every comment helps keep this message alive and reach more people who may need this very message right now. Your support is much more than a number. It's proof that this seed is germinating in many hearts. So, if you felt this conversation resonated with you, leave a like as a sign that we're together on this mission. And right at the end, don't rush off. Here on the side will appear a video that complements and expands on everything we discussed today. It's like a natural continuation of this journey, bringing new perspectives, details, and revelations that will further strengthen your faith and your understanding of what's happening behind the spiritual scenes of our time. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Right there, I choose to be on the side of the light. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this message spoke directly to your heart. And that's precisely why I want to invite you to continue this journey with me. Here on the channel, each video is designed to bring reflections that strengthen faith, broaden understanding of the signs we're experiencing, and help us make more informed decisions in our daily lives. So, if you feel this content has nourished you spiritually, subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. There's much more profound and valuable content to come. And since you stuck with me until the end, leave a comment below. I'm with you until the end. It's our way of showing our presence and showing that we're together on this journey. And, if you can, leave a like too. This helps the video reach more people and shows that this conversation resonated with you. But it doesn't stop there. There's a video right here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into what we discussed today. Click through and continue with me there.